Hello everybody, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines. Welcome back to a new video today. We're talking about the SS Athenia, a lovely passenger vessel owned by the anchor Donaldson Line, which met a tragic fate during World War II. She was the very first UK ship to be sunk by Germany at the start of the war. And this incident led to the Donaldson Line's greatest single loss of life at sea. Join me as we uncover her entire story, from her construction to the tragic moment she vanished beneath the waves. This fine vessel was owned by the shipping company Anchor Donaldson Line, a joint venture between Anchor Line and Donaldson Line. She was constructed by the Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company. Now, looking at the specifics of the vessel, her gross tonnage would be 13,465 gross registered tons. She measured 526.3 feet in length with a beam of 66.4 feet, powered by 6 steam turbines driving twin screws through double reduction gearing. She was capable of reaching a speed of 15 knots. She could carry 516 cabin class passengers and 1,000 in third class. By 1930, her navigation equipment featured wireless direction finding, and by 1934, she was upgraded with an echo sounding device and a gyrocompass. She had a sister ship, the SS Letitia. The SS Athenia was launched on January 28, 1922, and she would be completed in 1923. The SS Athenia, along with her sister ship, were the two largest vessels in Donaldson's various fleets. They operated on the Anchor Donaldson transatlantic route, connecting Liverpool and Glasgow with Quebec and Montreal during the summer, and with Halifax in the winter. After the construction of Halifax's Pier 21 immigration complex in 1928, the SS Athenia became a frequent visitor, completing over 100 trips to Halifax with immigrants. In 1935, the Anchor Line went into liquidation, and the Donaldson Line acquired most of its assets. By 1936, the company was restructured and became the Donaldson Atlantic Line. On September 1st, 1939, the Athenia, under the command of Captain James Cook, departed from Glasgow bound for Montreal, with scheduled stops in Liverpool and Belfast. On board were 1,103 passengers, including around 500 Jewish refugees, 469 Canadians, 311 Americans, 72 British subjects, and a crew of 315. This voyage took place despite growing signs that war was imminent. The SS Athenia departed Liverpool at 1 p.m. on September 2nd, without recall. By the evening of September 3rd, the day Britain declared war on Germany, the ship was 60 nautical miles south of Rockall and 200 nautical miles northwest of Innistrahul, Ireland. Around 4:30 p.m. she was spotted by the German U-boat U-30, commanded by Oberleutnant Fritz Julius Lemp. Lemp later stated that the Athenia's darkened condition and zigzagging course, well off normal shipping routes, led him to believe it was either a troop ship, Q ship, or an armed merchant cruiser. U-30 tracked the Athenia for 3 hours before, at 7:40 p.m. Lemp ordered the launch of 2 torpedoes, one of which struck the ship's port side. Numerous crew members in the engine and boiler rooms perished. Debris of metal and wood cascaded onto the tourist deck, causing deaths and injuring many others. Below decks, In the third-class quarters and aft dining rooms, there was utter devastation. Cabins lay in ruins, corridors were littered with wreckage, and water began to surge in. Some individuals found themselves trapped in their cabins, drowning as the water rose. At least one stairway collapsed, blocking escape routes, and when the lights went out, a wave of panic spread through the ship. Many attempted to reach the cabins, where children had been settled for the night, while others navigated the dark, waterlogged corridors, desperately searching for a way out. On the bridge, Third Officer Colin Porteous felt the ship lurch violently to starboard when the torpedo hit, before slowly settling back, listing slightly to port. Instinctively, he rang the telegraph to stop the engines and slammed down the control, sealing the watertight doors. Just then, while Porteous activated the emergency station's alarm, Captain Cook arrived to take command of his ill-fated ship. After confirming that all watertight doors were secured, he instructed Chief Radio Officer Don to send emergency signals in plain language. A few ships in the vicinity began to respond to Athenia's distress signal. The first acknowledgement came from the Norwegian freighter Knut Nelson, approximately 40 miles away, expected to arrive within 3 hours. Soon after, the Swedish yacht Southern Cross and the American city of Flint also replied, though they were farther away and would take longer to reach the scene. Chief Officer Barnett Copland rushed to the aft of the ship to assess the situation and the extent of the damage. Water was already high in number 5 hold, rising quickly in number 6, and the edge of the poop deck was beginning to flood. While it was clear that the SS Athenia was going down, Copeland estimated that it would take some time and believed it was still possible to launch the lifeboats, potentially saving those who weren't already lost. Captain Cook made the decision to abandon ship, instructing his crew to proceed to the boat stations. Most of the crew remained composed, ensuring that the lifeboats were deployed in an orderly fashion, which contributed to the relatively low loss of life. Within half an hour, more than half of the survivors had evacuated the liner. Due to the ship's list, the lifeboats on the port side descended easily, while those on the starboard side scraped along the hull with more difficulty. Nevertheless, all the boats made it into the water. Women and children first was the prevailing protocol of the time, and it was strictly enforced, leading to a disproportionate number of women and children in the initial lifeboats, for reasons that are hard to understand today. Many young children, including toddlers, were separated from their parents and placed into the nearest boat ready to be lowered. This separation led to many heart-wrenching scenes and deepened the despair in the days that followed. Amid the early chaos, some of the first boats were lowered before they were fully loaded, requiring passengers to climb down ladders or use lifelines before they could cast off. During this process, some individuals fell into the oily sea, some drowned, while most were rescued and pulled into a boat, shocked and distressed. As light quickly faded, Captain Cook ordered Chief Electrician Bennett to activate the emergency dynamo to assist in lowering the lifeboats. Less than 10 minutes after the torpedo struck, a searchlight on the bridge and arc lights in the mastheads illuminated the liner's decks. All 26 lifeboats were successfully launched. Some remained close, while others drifted into the darkness. Most passengers were overcome by seasickness or sank into a deep sense of despair for the remainder of the night. The last lifeboat, number 7A, cast off around 9:30 p.m. By that time, the Athenia had developed a list of approximately 12 degrees. Those still on board Cook, Copland, and a dozen crew members and passengers gathered on the foredeck. By 11 p.m., Cook decided it was time for them to leave, calling back the number 5 motorboat, which had made space by transferring several passengers to other, less crowded boats. Before leaving his post, radio operator Don locked the transmission key to send a continuous signal for approaching ships to home in on. In London, the Admiralty received a message from Malin Head Coast Guard radio at 10:30 p.m. indicating that the Athenia was sending SSS signals, which meant she was under attack by a U-boat. About 25 minutes later, another signal confirmed that the ship was sinking and that there were 1,400 passengers on board. Urgent messages were dispatched to all naval units in the area with orders to provide assistance. The Knut Nelson arrived shortly after midnight. Master Carl Johan Andersen spotted flares illuminating several lifeboats as he drew closer and noted that they were quite full. Since his ship was in ballast and riding high in the water, getting the survivors aboard would be challenging. There was no time to waste, so the Norwegian freighter hove to, turning her side against the weather to create a sheltered space for the lifeboats behind her hull. To keep the vessel steady, Captain Andersen kept the 2 propellers turning slowly, allowing the ship to maintain a slight headway. One of the first lifeboats to reach them was the number 5 motorboat carrying Captain Cook and 3rd Officer Porteous. A visibly relieved Cook boarded and was promptly invited to the bridge by Captain Andersen to explain what had happened and help with the rescue efforts. More lifeboats arrived, rowed by those able to manage an oar. Rope ladders were lowered over the side, and a bosun's chair was set up to hoist those who couldn't climb aboard. One by one, the survivors were brought to safety. One of the boats approaching Knut Nelson was the overcrowded number 5A. It had some momentum, but those rowing were mostly passengers, resulting in slow progress. At 4 a.m., as the lifeboat finally neared the freighter, several empty boats were tied to the railings. Boat number 12 was still being emptied. The Norwegian crew shouted and gestured for them to wait their turn. However, lifeboat number 5A, carrying around 90 passengers, mostly women and children, found itself positioned behind the boat. Number 12, dangerously close to the slowly rotating propellers, with its sides still above the water. At that moment, a lookout on the bridge of Knut Nelson reported a lifeboat sinking ahead. Although neither Captain Andersen nor Captain Cook could see the situation, the urgency of the report prompted Captain Cook to ring the engine telegraph for full ahead, just in case. The freighter's propellers immediately reacted, churning the water into white foam beneath the stern. Tragically, the hawser of lifeboat number 5A became taut and snapped under the strain, sending the still crowded boat back into the rapidly spinning starboard propeller. Despite frantic cries from the deck to stop the engines, it was already too late. The lifeboat was pulled into the propeller and shredded to pieces. Those who weren't killed instantly were thrown into the water, drifting into the darkness as Knut Nelson moved away, despite some Norwegian sailors sliding down the lifelines to rescue those in the water before it was too late. In the end, fewer than a dozen survivors from lifeboat number 5A were rescued, with some clinging to fragments of wreckage for several hours before being picked up. 2.5 hours after Knut Nelson, the Southern Cross arrived and began taking survivors aboard into her luxurious environment. It must have felt surreal for the cold, wet, and miserable rescuees to be welcomed onto the brightly lit, impeccably clean yacht, where they were offered hot drinks and warm clothing in every imaginable size. Unfortunately, an accident also occurred on the Southern Cross. The elegant yacht bobbed gently in the Atlantic swell, but her small size caused the stern to dip perilously close to the water with each passing wave. Lifeboat number 8 drifted too close while waiting to be emptied, and a particularly large swell crashed down on her stern, sending more than 50 passengers, many of them children, into the water. Although the Southern Cross had a small crew, some sailors leapt into a couple of the empty lifeboats and managed to rescue around 40 of the unfortunate men and women from the number 8 lifeboat. Polish refugee Isaac Stotland and his wife were in one of the other boats, waiting their turn, while their 2 children, both under 10, remained on the number 8 lifeboat. When he saw the boat with his children capsizing, Stotland jumped into the water and swam toward the overturned wreckage. He managed to pull a dozen children to safety, but tragically, neither of his own was among them. They had been lost. Just before dawn, the British destroyers Electra and Escort arrived, while Electra began patrolling the area for U-boats. The Escort rescued the survivors still in the water, followed by those in the lifeboats, including those clinging to the remnants of lifeboat number 5A. Later, when the destroyer Fame arrived, she took over the search efforts while Electra assisted Escort in rescuing the remaining survivors from the boats. The last lifeboat to be attended to was number 14A, carrying 105 passengers. This was the boat Chief Officer Copland had transferred to, and upon boarding the Electra, he climbed to the bridge to be greeted by Lieutenant Commander Buss. He also met the nurse from the SS Athenia, and while reviewing the list of survivors, they discovered that a woman was likely left behind in the liner's sickbay. She had fallen down a ladder prior to the attack and suffered a concussion, and no one had confirmed her evacuation. Copeland persuaded Lieutenant Commander Buss that he needed to return, and with the Electra positioned close to the sinking ship, a boat was crewed by sailors from the destroyer. Copland and 2 volunteers re-entered the sinking vessel, located the woman in the sickbay, and brought her back to the destroyer. Just minutes after their return, at 10:40 p.m., the Athenia's stern slipped beneath the surface, her bow rising towards the sky, as she quietly disappeared. In total, the SS Athenia remained afloat for more than 14 hours. Of the 1,417 people on board, 1,305 were rescued, while 112 perished, comprising 93 passengers and 19 crew members. Among the deceased, 28 were American citizens. The Southern Cross rescued over 350 survivors, Knut Nelson around 450, Electra 200, and Escort 300. The Norwegian freighter headed for Galway, while the destroyers set course for Greenock on the Clyde. By 9 a.m., the American freighter City of Flint arrived at the scene. Few remained to be rescued, but despite the choppy sea, a boat was lowered to collect stragglers from some of the bobbing lifeboats and to ensure the others were empty. Subsequently, 236 survivors were transferred from the Southern Cross, as she was not equipped to accommodate such a large number of additional people. Those rescued by Southern Cross who did not wish to continue to the USA, including all of Athenia's crew members, were taken on board the other ships. After confirming that no one else remained in the now empty lifeboats, Captain Gaynard bid farewell to the Swedish yacht and set a course for Halifax, where he arrived on September 13th. The Southern Cross continued her voyage toward South America. Of the 54 fatalities, 28 were US citizens and the rest were Canadian, which raised concerns in Germany that the incident might prompt the United States to enter the war. It wasn't until the Nuremberg trials, after the war, that the full truth about the U-boat sinking of the Athenia was revealed. The incident received widespread dramatic coverage across the English-speaking world. Many newspapers featured photographs of the lost ship on their front pages, alongside headlines announcing the UK's declaration of war. For instance, the Halifax Herald on September 4th, 1939, prominently displayed a banner on its front page reading, "Liner Athenia is torpedoed and sunk, with Empire at war," featured in large red print at the center. Among the casualties was 10-year-old Margaret Hayworth, a Canadian girl who became one of the first Canadians to be killed by enemy action. Newspapers widely reported her story, headlining it as 10-year-old victim of torpedo, which became a rallying point for Canadians and set the tone for the war coverage that followed. When her body was returned to Hamilton, Ontario, approximately 1,000 people gathered at the train station to pay their respects. Her public funeral was attended by notable figures, including the Mayor of Hamilton, the City Council, Lieutenant Governor Albert Edward Matthews, Premier Mitchell Hepburn, and the entire Ontario cabinet. Upon hearing about the sinking of the Athenia, Grand Admiral Raeder made inquiries and learned that no U-boat was within 75 miles of the incident site. Consequently, he informed the US Chargé d'Affaires, in good faith, that the German Navy was not involved. However, when the U-30 returned to Wilhelmshaven on September 27th, Commander Lemp reported to Admiral Dönitz that he had sunk Athenia by mistake. Dönitz promptly sent Lemp to Berlin, where he explained the situation to Raeder. Raeder, in turn, reported to Hitler, who decided that the incident should remain secret for political reasons. Raeder chose not to court-martial Lemp, believing that he had made a justifiable error, and the log of U-30, which had been seen by many, was altered to support the official denials. Lemp was later killed in action in 1941. In the United States, a Gallup poll revealed that 60% of respondents believed the Germans were responsible for the sinking, despite initial claims that the SS Athenia had been sunk by the UK for propaganda reasons, with only 9% believing otherwise. While some anti-interventionists urged for restraint, they also expressed their outrage over the sinking. Boke-Carter condemned it as a criminal act. Some were not entirely convinced that Germany was truly responsible for the sinking. Herbert Hoover voiced his skepticism, stating, "It is such poor tactics that I cannot believe even the clumsy Germans would commit such an act." Similarly, North Carolina Senator Robert Rice Reynolds asserted that Germany had no incentive to sink the Athenia. He argued that at best, such an action would only serve to further inflame the world, particularly America, against Germany without any significant gain from the sinking. He also suggested that Britain might have had a motive to infuriate the American people. It was not until January 1946, during Admiral Raeder's trial at the Nuremberg trials, that Admiral Dönitz's statement was presented, in which he admitted that Athenia had indeed been torpedoed by U-30 and that extensive efforts had been made to cover it up. Lemp, who claimed he had confused the ship for an armed merchant cruiser, was the first to take steps to hide the truth by neglecting to record the incident in the submarine's log and ensuring his crew remained silent about it. As the Athenia was an unarmed passenger ship, the attack contravened both the Hague Conventions and the London Naval Treaty of 1930, which permitted all warships, including U-boats, to stop and search merchant vessels, but prohibited their capture as prizes or sinking unless the ship was carrying contraband or engaged in military activities. Even in such cases, if a decision was made to sink the ship, the safety of passengers and crew had to be prioritized, requiring their transfer to a place of safety. Although Germany had not signed the 1930 treaty, the German 1936 prize rules, which governed their naval commanders, incorporated many of its restrictions. However, Lemp of the U-30 disregarded these protocols, opting instead to fire without warning. In 2017, oceanographer and marine archaeologist David Mearns discovered a wreck he believes to be Athenia. He located the wreck on Rockall Bank using sonar imagery scanned by the Geological Survey of Ireland to map the sea floor. Mearns remarked, "Can I go into a court of law and claim 100% that's the Athenia? No. However, unless a photograph surfaces, I can confidently say that, in my expert opinion, there is a very high probability that this is indeed the Athenia. Everything aligns."
And that marks the end of a video, my friends. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that would help out the channel a lot. Now, if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below, as I absolutely love reading your comments. And please let me know in the comment section down below as well what ships you would like me to cover in the future. Now, be as well sure to check out our social media pages. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also recently have a website, oldshippinglines.com, where we have articles of the ships we cover and we have book reviews as well. I think you will enjoy the website very much. Now, with that out of the way, guys, I wish you all a good night or day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy, and we will see each other on the next video. Goodbye, my friends.